Hello, everybody. Welcome back to our CIE panelist of day 2. And again, I am your host, Zlion, and today we have a lovely and very, very important and interesting panel on esports law. So it's our You've Been Served panel. And today we got 2 wonderful panelists. We got William Mullet as well as Abavi Sidu. So if you guys could introduce yourselves, we'll start off with William and introduce yourself, tell us what you do, as well as, what has been your favorite video game to grind recently?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. So I'm a corporate and intellectual property lawyer based in Calgary, Alberta, at a firm called Nickel Law. We do a broad set of legal services from litigation to corporate to financing, what have you, for local and international clients. I'm a former president of the U of A Esports Association, and as well as a former CSGO professional. There was some really great glory years back in the day, but I'd say I probably can never play Counter-Strike ever again because now I just feel bad and I feel old. But otherwise, for what games I've been grinding out recently, I haven't really actually been grinding out too many games other than getting through my backlog on Steam. So I'm currently playing Disco Elysium, which is like probably not the best thing for a lawyer because you're reading all day and then you're like, oh, let me play this like really intense visual novel that's just nonstop reading and text. Awesome. So that's what I've been doing. It's been great.
Really putting your eyes in overtime, eh? But anyways, moving on to you, Amar. Would you like to introduce yourself, what you do, as well as what game you've been kind of grinding, if you had time to grind any games recently?
Yeah, we'll get into that, but my name's Amarveer Sidhu. I'm the founder and lawyer at Amarveer Law. We're a law firm based in Toronto, and we work with creatives, with entrepreneurs, business owners, and indie game studios and publishers. What we do is, corporate, commercial, and intellectual property law. I also serve as the Chief Legal Officer at Esports Canada, which I hope many of you are very familiar with, where we're looking to, help build the organization, represent the organization, internally, in the relationships that we make across the country, but also internationally with the relationships we're building there, but also elevating the platform for Canadians at the international level. In terms of gaming, I used to be a very, competitive gamer as well. I used to play CS, like the original one, back in the day, a lot of Smash, and sports game like FC, but back then it was called FIFA. Nowadays, just because it's so busy with all the work, I typically find myself grinding JRPGs. So I just finished an 120-hour session of Yakuza, Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth.
Dang.
And I play that only in Japanese. So that's a lot of heavy reading and just sitting through it as well. So
Yikes.
It seems like you guys both like to torture yourselves after hours and reading a lot, eh?
as long as it's on
Unfortunate.
our terms, then it's okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough. If you're enjoying it, I guess it's not really like as tedious. But anyways, let's get straight into it. Introduction of esports law. So esports law is not, at least for me going into this panel too, I don't really know anything or a lot about esports law in general. So I guess I'll open up with you, Amar. Like, what exactly is esports law, and how would you define that?
So esports law, I'd say, is you know it can be kind of considered like a subcategory of the video game space, but it's also its sort of own area in its own right because you're dealing with a lot of like players, for example, and players are sometimes the product themselves in this space. So it's very similar to how you'd be dealing with creators, whether the musicians or artists who have to negotiate contracts because they're sort of tied to teams or record labels or something like that. But the beauty of it is esports is quite complicated because it's tied to the video game industry, and the games that are often being played are big, games that are owned by publishers. And so there's a lot of negotiations. There's a lot of intellectual property that parties have to consider. So it's a very fast moving space of law. It does, I think, require someone who understands the space and understands what kind of goes in on the day-to-day basis of not just being a player, but also the understanding how video games are and operate. But it's exciting for someone like myself who loves video games and esports. I'm just happy to be a part of it.
And for you, William, I mean, you guys both got into this is a pretty like we talked it off stream, but this is a pretty like niche section of law in general. But for William, how did you first get into esports law?
Yeah. So I first got into esports law primarily just because I had to retire from professional gaming, and
Mm,
I kind of pivoted into my legal career. I've always wanted to be a lawyer, but I always wanted to be a professional gamer first and foremost. And sometimes you just got to hang up your hat and understand that, sometimes you have a set skills, you have set skills that is better for other things. And so when it came about that, I realized, I can't be playing video games forever professionally if I'm not at the top, if I'm not at like Shroud's level, or
mm-hmm,
part of, the teams in LA, then I got to figure out how to make a living. Uh, and through law school, I realized there's a really big thing missing in my life, which is video games. I quit video games for law school and to make sure that I got into law school because those grades are suffering if you have a LAN in Philadelphia, like during final season. Like you got
mm-hmm,
no, don't have time to study. You got scrims, okay? So
mm-hmm,
um, there was a big hole that I needed to fill, and I realized, video games they're in need of lawyers. They're in need of regulated professions. They need everybody, because it's just another industry that we need to address properly right now. And recently, it's gone better recently, but it used to be effectively just the wild west of whatever happens, throw some VC money. But it's been really interesting just on the basis that going back into it with my ability to assess it with legal knowledge as a lawyer, and then also kind of shape the landscape of esports law to a certain extent. It's it's been very fun, uh, and there's so much more to learn and adapt, especially because video games are even becoming more and more regulated, at least in
mm-hmm.
Europe. And because, as Amor said, esports is a subset of video games to a certain extent, that means esports is also going to be a little bit regulated. So I just
Mm-hmm.
fell into it again because I love video games. Granted, I can't play professionally anymore, but I can definitely, try my best with what I have to stay involved in the industry.
Mm-hmm. And what about for you, Amar? How did you get into esports law?
Um, it's a long story. William, I think, knows a lot about it. We've chatted about it many times. But in the middle of COVID, I decided to start up my own firm. And I, figured similarly, I have a set of skills as a lawyer, but also like a platform that I have to represent, to represent people, to represent businesses and organizations, and help protect them in certain situations as well. And I wanted to do it so, as a lawyer, we're usually slogging away for hours and hours a day. So it has to be something that it's worthwhile for us, but also something that is related to something we enjoy. And a big part of that for me is, the technology space, and in particular, video games. And I identified this as a space where, in esports as well, as a place that, there's a lot of there are real issues at play here, but there aren't really many lawyers in this space that really would call themselves video game players, or esport gamers or professional athletes in that way. They may know of it, but they may also be really good lawyers themselves. But this is an industry that lacked that insider knowledge or that specialization that goes a long way. Because at the end of the
Mm-hmm.
day, yes, we read a lot of contracts, we negotiate, um, and we're helping, clear obstacles. Um, but it's better if we understand what the subject matter is. And
Mm-hmm.
so, I took video games and esports as something that I enjoyed, personally. And so, how can I apply this to my career as a lawyer? Which, this is also a career where it's not necessarily a 9 to 5. We're lawyers for life. This is our profession. So marry them. And I started my own firm on this premise because there aren't many other law firms out there in Canada that provide such services or work in this space. And
Mm-hmm.
it's been an amazing way to just connect with people across the country, and be a part of amazing projects and organizations that are helping to build this as it continues to grow into the future.
Okay. And I know at least like for myself, my first introduction to esports in general was actually at the collegiate level. And I think that's also applicable for esports law, right? There is different levels of esports law, whether that is esports law on the collegiate level or competitive or even through different industries, right? And I think for you, William, you actually have a background as a former president of the University of Alberta Esports Association. So when you're talking about esports law and how that connects to the collegiate level, if there's a student trying to start like an esports association at their school, what legal guidelines should they really be aware of, and what kind of limitations are there in using their school branding in that sense?
Mm. Yeah. So anything we say today, by the way, not legal advice, but just
Yeah.
always got to put that disclaimer out there.
Of
But
course.
at least in my history at the University of Alberta, um, for a lot of people trying to launch their collegiate esports club or esports association, I mean, the first step is always dealing with like the college or post-secondary institution. Like there's going to be guidelines, advertising guidelines, club student life guidelines. There's so much bureaucracy when we were dealing with the University of Alberta. They're nevertheless amazing and great people who helped us facilitate some of the most rewarding accomplishments, at least for esports on the student level. But you're going to run into at least issues with how the administration's perception on esports is, um, your university constitution. Advertising was the biggest issue, because sponsors want
Mm,
to talk to your university or collegiate esports club and go, hey, we want to do this deal. And the university had a lot of guidelines with how that can be done. And the major one actually was beverage exclusivity, because almost every post-secondary institution has some type of beverage
mm,
contract. And what's really ubiquitous in esports, energy drinks. So even just navigating sponsorships or collaborations with certain events that might be related to unnamed beverages, uh, it was difficult, but otherwise really rewarding and really great. I'd highly encourage anybody who's very passionate about esports to try their best to launch with their esports association or club or what have you at your campus. And if you can't, there's always local ones that you can join up. It's not like there's usually that many issues with having people outside of the campus be involved. Granted, you're not a student there, but people just really enjoy having that sense of community and having people come in through that community when you're passionate about it.
Okay. And then I think within the esports, like at the collegiate level, is also the introduction of players, right? And you play
Yeah.
competitively at the collegiate level, but then also some players graduate from that and play competitively on a professional level. And I think one of the biggest hurdles that there are kind of these player contracts that come in line, right? And I know Amar, for you, you've actually dealt with you actually talked about this topic on your for your startup on your Instagram. You guys answer a lot of these questions, and one of the key questions were kind of like, how do you navigate player contracts? How do you navigate the legalities of that? And so, like, giving you a situation, if you're an like excited young player, graduate from the collegiate level into the professional level, and you're just breaking into esports scene, trying to pursue that career, like you can often find yourself in these like very high pressure situations regarding, player contracts, like tight signing deadlines or not knowing how to negotiate, or like even an esports organization kind of preying on the fact that you're not knowledgeable and having too much control over your career in those senses. How do you recommend like your legal advice for players to navigate these scenarios, and what are some things that they should really be looking out for when you are talking about player contracts?
Yeah, and full disclaimer, this is not legal advice,
Hmm.
but um, you know, there's I'd say four kind of key things to know off the bat, and I think a lot of it comes around the fact that you're coming straight out of college or university, you're signing something professional, and you know what, you're in college or university usually to study, to develop your career or pursue some profession, but you've got this opportunity to just say, hey, forget that, I'm living the dream, I can actually get paid to play games professionally, right? And just that in itself is um, you have to kind of think, it's like it's a huge factor in the decision making process, but also the environment that that person finds themselves in when they're presented with a contract. Many times they don't think twice, they don't even look at it, they can't wait to sign it, and they don't realize what the consequences of signing that is until later down the line. So, I'd say get independent advice right off the bat. And I don't qualify that as legal advice. I would say legal advice would be ideal, right? Any lawyer who has a background of understanding, contracts, I'd say contract lawyer. If you can, an entertainment or sports lawyer, and even better, if you can, an esport lawyer that knows the ins and outs of it directly. Secondly, uh, don't rush. Take your time. I know you might feel that you're in this situation and you're thinking, well, if it's not me, they're going to go for someone else. Hey, that may be the case, but this opportunity's come to you, and be in your best position. Put your front foot forward when you're entering into these sort of contracts, and that then would be, negotiate. um,
Hmm.
Everything is actually negotiable. Nothing is silly. I know there's a industry standard, that term gets thrown around, or market standard, or this is how it's done. Don't we can't change. It's non-negotiable. Push it. Once you sign it, it's in paper. It's official. And to help all of this, to tie it up, I'd say look for support, right? Whether that's a lawyer, again, ideally, but in a different kind of capacity. A lawyer is strong support. But if you have an agent, agents do help. They have a lot of knowledge in this space as well when it comes to negotiating contracts. Sometimes, unless you have an esport lawyer and an entertainment sport lawyer, an agent might be even better than that. um, a coach who might have experience in this, but also some impartial advice. Coaches are critical to your development. Depending on your age, or not necessarily, just your parents, your family, they might have some words of wisdom and how to make that decision. And if you can speak or reach out to someone who's been there before, who has experience, to see, is this is this like, what are the thoughts on this before you rush into signing?
Hmm. And for you, William, too, you actually have experience, playing professionally, and you worked with tier two and tier one teams back in your days in CS:GO. So I'm pretty sure you are very familiar with player contracts, actually. So what was your kind of experience with that, and how did you kind of navigate the legalities of those situations?
Honestly, when I was younger, first contract, I'm always right on the money. Man, you rush into it and you're like, oh my gosh, like money, fame, it's right at your fingertips. You rush into it, you sign it, then boom, turns out probably not the best contract you should ever sign ever. Um, for context, I got paid in pizza. I didn't get any pizza. So it's that's
Oh my
how it
god.
is when you're young. Is when you're young and you don't have that support system, probably should have lawyered up. Granted, this was like six years ago, uh, before I became a lawyer, even attended law school. But
Hmm.
that's kind of the way it is with a lot of player contracts. Is make sure you know what you're signing up for. It's a contract, not just a player contract. It's better if you have people who are very familiar with the industry so that they know what are the issues that have kind of been faced in court. For example, you know, a couple of years ago, Tifu had a huge issue with his contract with FaZe.
Hmm. Yeah.
And that was a very fun debacle to read about uh, when you're kind of looking at potentials of, Tifu becoming rivaling FaZe's fame in Fortnite and having certain clauses in his contract that weren't very favorable to him because he signed it so early, right? So be hyper aware of what people might even say is industry standard because, in my opinion, in esports, there's no industry standard right now. That term is thrown around a lot. Granted, there's some things that are standardized nevertheless, but for a lot of the things that really matter for players, you know your worth and get somebody to help you along the way. Otherwise, you don't want to be in a situation where, for example, a good one in League of Legends is being benched for months and months and months and nobody being able to pick up your contract. And now you are basically in bench prison for your team. Very fun.
Hmm. No. The being paid by pizza thing is insane. I can't lie. It sounds like that was a really rough time for you, especially
It's the
once you
Wild
understand.
West.
Uh, that is definitely really tough. But I think the other way or like kind of direction when you go from collegiate level to maybe professional level, where it comes to passion to video games, right, is either become like a professional gamer or like some players actually transition to content creation as well. And I think there's actually a lot of legalities regarding content creation and that kind of sphere of things. So what are some important like resources that new content creators should know about or consult before creating and publishing content, whether that's on Twitch or whether that's like creating videos on YouTube? Like what would you say that is, Amar?
Um, you know, learn about intellectual property because I think that's the most important thing in this industry. At the end of the day, um, if you look at like a video game, let's say, it itself is a form of intellectual property. It's as an asset, and then it's broken down into multiple pieces that have their own sort of intellectual property rights associated with that. And similarly, when as a player, right, or as a content creator, you're typically dealing with others or your own intellectual property as well. If you're streaming, right, you might be showcasing gameplay footage of a game that's owned by a certain publisher, right? They own all the intellectual property rights behind that. Similarly, you might have some music that you play in your video as well, with like an intro or during the course of. And there were many issues in the past where Twitch would just mute or take down videos because of copyright infringements just due to the music that was played. Um, so understanding intellectual property is super important. Just how varied it is, again, how it applies, and it's something that you can do to kind of use in your back pocket so that when you make decisions, you can do so with that kind of knowledge. You don't need to necessarily speak with a lawyer or anything like that before setting up, although that's always recommended because lawyers can give you sort of um, that sort of crash course on, hey, here are the things that you should consider when you're looking to set up, and let you know about all the different things that you might miss. Because in this space, it does involve a lot of folks that are just trying it out, not really
Hmm.
realizing what they're doing or what the impact really is. Not just because they're ignorant or anything like that, but just because it's a very complicated space and you don't know who the publisher or the IP holder is and how they might go about enforcing things against them and what those repercussions might be on the streamer. It's just, on one side, it's very heavy loaded in terms of the legal protections enforcements that they have. and on the other side you have, new players. You're coming in. A lot of time they just want to have fun, but they're also looking to start a business on this. And then when those clash, uh, you sometimes end up having problems that you just don't even know where they even stem from. But if I
Mm-hmm.
were to say there is, let's say, one thing that most likely is where the problems are stemming from, it's some sort of intellectual property. So just
Mm-hmm.
kind of having a grounded sort of knowledge, at least of what that is, the different types of intellectual property goes a long way.
And speaking on intellectual property, that is actually like it's very important to know the distinctions between copyright laws as well as patents and trademarks, right? And before we this is applicable for not even just content creation for streaming or for as a content creator, but also it kind of evolves into also it also kind of overlaps into game development too. But we really have to understand what they are. So for William, how would you kind of define what is intellectual property law? Like what are these patents, copyrights, or trademarks that you kind of hear? Like, what are these words, and like, how would you explain that to someone who has like little to no legal knowledge?
Um, that's a tough question, at least in my opinion, because you have your trademark patents, copyrights. At least in video games and esports, you're mostly dealing with your copyrights and trademarks. Patent side is going to be your modern novel inventions. That's going to be taking generally you want a patent agent or a patent lawyer to help you with inventing something new and going through the patent process with the Canadian Intellectual Property Office. It's a very it's a fun process. I love patent law, but that's not really as applicable to a lot of video games and esports, with exception to previous controversies such as the Nemesis system for Shadow of Mordor and whatnot, as well as the current issues between Pokemon and Pal World. But
Mm,
I'd say to anybody, a really basic rundown can be one. I would plug Mars website. He has a good couple of IP blog posts about it. But I mean, your copyright's going to be creative works, right? It's inclusive of player performances, video game broadcasting. It's these exclusive rights to uh, do certain things to certain creative works. So one example is take a photo. Do you actually own that photo? There you go. You got some copyright to that photo. There's registered and unregistered trademarks at the common law. Your trademark's going to kind of be indicative of what you are, what your product is, uh, navigated by the Trademarks Act, and it's going to be enforceable at the common law or whether or not you register it. Your main concern usually when you're a streamer or a content creator is going to be enforcing your copyright, such as, for example, if you scroll on TikTok, you scroll Reels, there's just nonstop reposts of other people's content. That's going to be a copyright issue, and sometimes even a trademark issue if somebody's appearing to potentially try and be whoever they're reposting, um, infringing on the trademark. Uh, Copyright being having the exclusive right to certain broadcasting rights, production rights. One example being a long time ago in CS:GO, there was star ladder issues, making certain Twitch channels getting flagged for copyright infringement because what's a common thing in FPS is watch parties for tournaments, and certain people were only allowed to broadcast the Star Ladder tournament a long time ago, and some people were getting copyright strikes for it. So, in the broad spectrum of things, it can be very complicated. Just
mhm.
read it up on it. MR is here. He's got some great blog posts. I'm around. Uh, but I hope that answers his question. But I can't get
Mhm.
into it too
It
deep, otherwise we'll
is.
be here all day.
Yeah, it's definitely like a really broad topic, and it would probably require like a 3 hour session panel to like really fully do like a deep dive of every single sector revolving copyright law and intellectual property law. But I think the most common thing I think about when it comes to content creation and copyright or intellectual property law is you keep hearing like on YouTube that, oh, I got a copyright strike, or I was sent a
Mhm.
cease and desist letter because my content was like I copyrighted someone's content. So for Amar, like what if in the situation, if you've accidentally as a content creator copyrighted someone else's content, not of course like not on purpose, but what's the process of appealing that? Where like what would you do in that situation?
Yeah, it's funny because like right now this week and sort of this month, we're highlighting a lot of cease and desist services that we offer, because
Fair.
it's super common, right? It's super common. Again, it kind of stems from what I was saying before. It's sometimes it's just not knowing, how grand intellectual property is, and now where everybody's just online all the time. We live online. We're always on social media. So sometimes the simplest things we don't realize might end up violating intellectual property rights of someone else. Um, and you just don't know who's on the other side. And it may end up being someone who is, has a legal team that goes around and actually enforces intellectual property, the rights that they have, because they probably, and to kind of add to what William was saying, is they've probably registered, their copyrights in Canada with SIPO under the Copyright Act, or they've got an official trademark registration. And when they've got these registered, then they've got a document that's government backed that says they actually own that intellectual property, and that stands up in court. And it also looks very scary when it's accompanied by a cease and desist letter, right?
Yeah.
So mistakes happen. It really does depend on who's on the other side, but typically, unless you're doing this with, and again, not legal advice here, but unless you're doing this with malicious intent, or you're doing this, negligently on purpose, the sort of best approach would be to read that cease and desist letter, right? Try to understand what it is that they're claiming, and speak with a lawyer that has experience with in particular, let's say, intellectual property here, to figure out what your options are, because it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be sued for millions of dollars, that your more importantly, your Twitch account or your social media accounts might be shut down. It doesn't necessarily mean that. Typically, the other party is willing to, hear a response from you or see some sort of actions from you, in good faith. And we've helped many clients in the past and even recently, especially in the video game space, where they're producing games that may be somewhat similar to more established games, right? And that's why I also say, understand IP, because then when it comes to even starting off, you're heading in the right direction. But you might get a cease and desist letter from a AAA publisher who's got a big time lawyer, like in LA or somewhere else, and it's super intimidating to get that. But with a measured response, with some legal advice, it doesn't have to go that far. It could be one letter back, some negotiations, and I think we lose William there.
I think we lost William. I think maybe his thing crashed a little bit. Oh. He's back. He's back. Oh my God, he's alive. Okay. Hello. Are you doing okay? Everything okay?
It was.
Okay, I'm just going to give me 1 second. I think because of that, your audio was also cut off. So I'm just going to.
I think there's a cease and desist on William's feed.
Someone's DDoSing you right now. All right, give me 1 second while I get that set up. Yeah, so 3. All right, and I will just transition over again. So William, can you say hi to stream again? See if your audio is working. Oh, seems you are gone again. Oh no. You said William's gone again.
Your audio unfortunate.
Is good. Yeah, no worries. In the meantime, we can talk. Just kind of going off of that too. There's also kind of when you are William is back. Okay, great.
There you go.
Nice. All right, I'm just gonna very quickly. If you want to speak 1 to 10 again, William, or say hi to the stream.
1 to 10, hi stream.
All right, beautiful. Audio is working beautifully. Thank you very much. All right, yeah, so I was actually going to direct this question also over to William, because you actually, and Nicole Law, you actually work with streamers and you work with content creators themselves. So what has been kind of, like, how did you tackle this topic on terms of like copyright strikes and cease and desist letters with your clients? Like, how did you approach this?
Yeah, I mean, adding on to a lot of the truth that MR is speaking to, um, cease and desists are meant to look scary, and there doesn't need to be incredibly harsh consequences. Granted, you probably want to abide by them with a measured response, and if it's worthwhile, you generally want to abide by some of them just so that there aren't issues. Um, but make sure to understand the risks involved when you're doing certain, you know, work. So one example is not even just content creators, but people who go to a lot of who table a lot of conventions, who are selling effectively, merchandise, fan art, video game characters that they love, anime, whatnot. I've seen a fair number of cease and desists to those
Mm,
tables and to those offerings. And it usually just comes down to, hey, you know what? Like, they see this, they want you to get rid of it. If you don't want to deal with the consequences of potential legal problems that they're trying to threaten you with, usually it's easier for you just go, hey, you know what? Let's stop this specific thing that they're talking about.
mhm,
Granted, you want to be very, I guess, proactive with your intellectual property use. And the vast majority of a lot of companies are more than happy that you're playing their video game if you're live streaming it.
mhm,
Like, there's times and controversies in historically when certain people who might be providing bad reviews of a certain game, there's been uses of the copyright system to kind of omit their review of the video game, but usually they're very, very happy. For example, Apex Legends. There wasn't really, in my understanding, is there wasn't even that much marketing involved other than just getting a ton of streamers to play Apex, like ton and
mm,
ton of top streamers to play Apex, and that's authorized use of their intellectual property to broadcast. And it was highly successful, and it's a great case study on marketing and esports and gaming. Um, just making sure that if you're navigating these copyright issues or trademark issues, they're authorized, and if you get a cease and desist letter, at least understand what the consequences are of what you want to do and what you might do if you keep going with the same way you're going. I'll even add
mhm,
on certain intellectual property issues might be regulated even further with, say, if you're a professional player in the LCS or in any realm of professional play in League of Legends, there's specific intellectual property rules with logos on jerseys. There's certain
mm.
logos that you're not allowed advertising. There's certain industries you're not allowed advertising, crypto. Uh, so, granted, they removed that part, I'm pretty sure, in their most recent global, rules for a competition, but they're you got to abide by those rules as well to make sure that if you are competing or you're a part of some circuit, there might be some additional intellectual property considerations you want to put into before they say, yeah, you know what, because you violated our merchandising rules, we got to kick you out.
Mhm. And I think following that conversation too, it's not just players and streamers that are having to abide by copyright rules. I think one of the other biggest kind of demographics that is affected by esports law, or have to be really aware of esports law, is actually game developers themselves. And Amar, you actually have a lot of clients who are game developers. So what is like the most common or some common like mistakes or guidelines that you would recommend your clients to follow? Of course, it's not legal advice. It's just, not official legal advice. You got to always preface that, right? So, how did you
Yeah.
approach this topic with a lot of your clients?
When I was kind of starting out, I just found like the industry, especially working with a lot of indie studios, that's primarily
Hmm.
like my client base, is there's just a lot of passion about trying to build the game, and sometimes there's solos or there's smaller studios that comprise mostly of like technical creators and developers without so
Hmm.
much of the legal knowledge there, or someone with like the business sort of mind as well. So a lot of education has to be sort of done at that level to understand, like, one, this is also a business, but you're also dealing with something like intellectual property that isn't this is something that you want to protect, but you might also want to be aware of how this might be infringing other intellectual property. And I know we've been sort of talking about intellectual property in a very sort of scary way, but
Hmm.
one thing I try to advise them on is intellectual property is also your moneymaker, right? This is something that you need to monetize and actually build your business out of, build and develop your game out of as well.
Mhm.
And again, just kind of like getting them to appreciate, if they already don't appreciate themselves, but from a legal perspective, is that, a game is made up of the character models. That's an intellectual property asset. The story, the script, the music that goes into that. Um, the coding that's done there, and also just, games a lot of the times, and, especially the type of games that I play are ones that are narrative heavy,
Mm.
and they're essentially like a story that's being played, that's interactive, that's immersive, right? So it's like taking like a book or a movie or something, but you can actually impact the way that that story is told, and that just kind of complicates but also adds value to the kind of intellectual property that's there, and you can make multiple iterations of that, right? So understanding that, realizing that you can make sequels, you can make prequels, which are called, derivatives.
Mhm.
You can also have spin-offs with other, like crossover with other intellectual property spaces as well, with like, musicians coming into like Fortnite, crossovers with like branding, with like shoes and merchandise. All of that is based off of your intellectual property. It starts off with a really strong game that people or players really identify with, but they want to take that to the next level, and that's through like merchandising or something like that. um, and another piece of advice is just to kind of know where your intellectual property is coming from when you're creating the game, right?
Mhm.
Because usually, especially at the indie level, you might have a solo developer who's looking to collaborate with someone else who might be in another country, or bring on a musician, and musicians have a lot of legal sort of rights of their own, to protect their rights to the music that they make, and understanding that if you want to have that music in your game, you need to make sure whether do you actually own it, do you have or is it a license, and then what does that even look like,
Mhm.
because it's okay at the beginning, but if your game is a success, and that's what you ultimately want it to be, is you're going to end up in some sort of a publishing agreement, and you'll want to make sure when you're dealing with them who ultimately owns the IP, or that if you do have some sort of license to use the IP that's in your game, because if you're ignorant to that, that could have severe consequences down the road. Especially the bigger
Mhm.
you get, the more problems you can have if
Yeah.
you're not careful.
And William, you two have a actually clientele base with the game developer as well. Like, what do you think is one of the main? What are some of the most common mistakes that game developers make in concerns to developing their game and respecting esports law?
Yeah, I mean, everything Amar said, like, add on to it. I think with esports law specifically, um, you have a lot of really major players that are all involved in their own intellectual property regimes. The game developer, potentially the publisher, the stream, the content media management platform, YouTube, Twitch, the big ones, Kick, even. You have the individual who's performing the stream or even broadcasting the stream. And then you even, at the more even granular level, you might even have performances within the game of other people, right? So
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of different players, involved in those types of legal regimes as well as protections of their intellectual property. Um, a classic example, at least, being not even just specific to esports, but I mean, if we look at the major esports of the world, they're all derivatives of another game. Granted, that's controversial for me to say, but there's been lawsuits about it. Half Life, Counter Strike 1.6 is a mod for it.
Mm-hmm.
Same with Team Fortress. Uh, League of Legends came from Dota, came from Eons of Strife on Warcraft, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there is a ton of derivatives where that has been litigated over in the courts in the US that have kind of proliferated around the world on how to operate with those intellectual property regimes. Um, and even more so, say you're performing or you're competing on a major tournament, for example, LCS, and you want to monetize your performance, well, there might be certain rules at the LCS on how to broadcast your own performance, right? Granted, the
Mm-hmm.
LCS has been really great on, supporting the community and publications of it. or broadcasting. But at the end of the day, how are you going to monetize your own content if the LCS owns it? Or even an example, if you're a CSGO player, or sorry, not a CS2 player, and for a long time CSGO, skins were a huge way for money making and monetization in esports. When they start releasing stickers of players who are able to just sign for your sticker,
Eric.
and the teams too for their stickers, some of them are worth $15,000-$30,000 each now, and I wish I kept them. But you got to be wary of what you're signing away or what you're signing into, so that you're not missing out on the success from what you did or the success of what is involved. Music is a big one too for a lot of people who will put in just music they like in their game, and then you have to tell them, hey, probably you need a license for that. Or they put a video like MR was saying, probably need a license for that. Making sure that if you bring somebody in to collaborate with you for your game development, making sure who owns the actual game, how is monetization going to go, how is everybody even making money off this game if you're bringing them in and potentially own a significant piece of it because you didn't sign a proper agreement dictating how much is being portioned out for everybody's contribution. So it sounds all scary, but it's not as scary if you are able to navigate it properly with the proper counsel, or even educate yourself a significant amount. Don't go saying, hey, it's me, Shroud, Michael Shroud Grishuk, and then starting a bunch of videos about it and then putting his face on top of your face on your content gameplay. Like, don't do that. Not legal advice, but don't do that. But
unofficial legal advice.
That's just common sense at this point.
Exactly. But that's all important to, when you're navigating legal things, there's going to be consequences, but there's also a lot of protections that you can really, bolster yourself and your own success for.
And a lot of what William said,
continue.
sorry to cut you off, there is
you're good.
Super translatable to like the conversation we're having about player contracts, right?
Yep.
These are similar issues that they're going to navigate once that's in front of them, like the exclusivity clause, termination, what that looks like, and then just getting paid, making sure it's not just pizza, but then if it is pizza, like making sure you actually get paid in pizza. It's that's all in there.
It's just like on my contract, I said pepperoni pizza, not cheese pizza. Okay, I'm missing my pepperonis right now. I would like to be paid properly. But you actually, Amar, you actually have so under your startup, for those of you who don't know, your startup actually has an Instagram that has a lot of these kind of posts that answers these Q&As regarding the legalities of esports law, right? And you talk about the monetization of games for game developers. You touched on one of your posts the difference between kind of the legal guidelines for deciding whether your game is going to be free to play or a pay to play, right? And also the publishing differences between if you were to publish as an indie company or under like a bigger publisher. What kind of legal for those two distinctions? It's definitely like two separate topics, but what would you say would be the legal distinctions between the two, and like what are the pros and cons for them?
To kind of quickly address one, so we don't really have to talk too much about it, is I would say a lot of the elements still apply, whether it's a free to play or a pay to play, or like a games as a service or a premium style game with a beginning and an end. The basics are still going to be the same, but obviously they're two different business models as well. And so one is going to be relying on a lot of advertising to get the money coming through. So those contractual terms might be different, but then you're also going to make sure you have someone who's advising you with what the rules are about advertising, and then in whatever jurisdiction that your game's going to be available on. Because can't forget here, this is a global industry. Canada's got a massive, developer market, but our games are going abroad, right, to the US, English-speaking countries, and then beyond. But the second question is, that's a really good one, and one of the reasons why I kind of got into this space was because I just noticed that a lot of indie studios were just signing publishing agreements regardless. And they were taking that, oh, this is industry standard for granted. They would just sign it. And, you realize that these are so one-sided. Not all publishers are bad. I also have publisher clients too. And a lot of them are great. A lot of them have amazing, fair contracts, because at the end of the day, they want to see this game succeed as well, and they want to build a relationship, right? So that's one thing I would say is whether you're going to go sort of the indie route as a with a publisher, or a bigger publisher, really just kind of depends on the type of game you're playing, whether this is your first um, sort of foray, your first release. Probably not going to end up having a publisher at all. You'll probably want to be releasing on self-publishing on, like Steam, for example, or some of the other platforms that are out there. And you might even be able to negotiate with some of the console platforms to get it on there. Like, Nintendo offers as a Nintendo. Microsoft is also very friendly when it comes to indie developers. Sony as well, PlayStation. Um, but your publisher can be a make or break in terms of how your game succeeds. And so
Hmm.
you want to make sure that this is an organization that understands the vision of what you've created here and the potential of the game, where it's going to go. Because likely, if it succeeds or things go well, you might want to be developing another one, and the publisher will be there to help you fund that. That's what they do, but also provide the channels to do so as well. Um, Speaking about a small indie like the Balatro, which is developed here in Canada, um, their success, a big part of it was because of who their publisher was. And they were so careful and meticulous in the way that they decided to market the game in order for it to get its success. So those are the kind of details that publishers would be doing. They take care of the distribution, generating that revenue, the merchandising, if that's going to be the case, um, distributing on different types of platforms, helping negotiate those deals as well. They may even take over the legal aspect of that game, and also what was it? Just the marketing, right?
Hmm.
That's a key thing. So if you're on the same sort of page, whether they're an indie publisher or a big publisher, that might not be sort of the factor in terms of size, but more so what makes sense, what's the best fit for you in this situation.
Hmm. And for William, like you guys going back on the topic of contracts as well, because publishing contracts, if you were to work with a big publisher versus if you were to stay indie, of course, this is very dependent on the type of game that you're going to make. So your clauses or your kind of contract will look different from case to case basis. But William, if you were a game developer and you want to work with a publisher, what are some red flags that you would look out for within those contracts?
Well, you probably don't want to give away your game completely. That's a good one.
Ownership.
You probably own your own game. Granted, I haven't really seen one where it's particularly that predatory, but there can be opportunities for certain publishers to be quite predatory. There are certain issues that might be dealing with how they want to market your game. You might not agree with certain marketing materials that they're pushing out or the messaging of your game, but that's all down to generally fit. When you're dealing with publishers, they can be a really great staunch ally for your game, making sure that you're both very successful because they want to champion your game. But they're also a business, and you're running a business, whether you like it or not. Just be aware of, making sure that you're properly protected because they're there for a reason and they're there to make money and cover a lot of these things that they want to cover. I'd also argue that the fit is a huge, huge aspect of it because certain games they'll run into regulatory issues. Granted, this wasn't PlayStack's fault for Balatro, but Balatro was running through some regulatory issues on their age restrictions in Europe, just because there was at least what they thought, gambling references, even though the game itself is not about gambling. It has aspects of poker, but it's not about gambling. And I would also argue be very wary of monetization strategies. If there's control over some types of design to your video game, personally or through whoever you're signing with, be careful because monetization is becoming more and more regulated globally, usually starting out in Europe and Asia, and that usually translates over to North America as well. One being, long time ago, loot boxes being regulated in Belgium. And now we're looking at
Mm.
regulating loot boxes across the EU and likely going to be potentially regulating loot boxes even more further. In Asia, I mean, in South Korea, your video gaming capacity is tied to your social insurance number, I'm pretty sure still. So you want to be aware. You want to be aware of what's going on. Making sure that you are adapt to the jurisdiction that your game is being involved in, and making sure that you're not, shooting yourself in the foot before you even get to the ability to run. Even look at storefronts. Steam Storefront, they had to update. I mean, this was probably pretty consistent, but they only recently updated, I think in the last year, an explicit message about not allowing certain video games with advertisement monetization, as in like, well, I can't give any specific examples and I don't want to give legal advice, but there's certain policies on Steam that saying, can't have ads in your games to a certain extent to monetize your video game. And that's something you kind of want to think about if you're doing a free-to-play model, because that's a significant monetization strategy for a lot of free-to-play games. So granted, that's generally on the mobile space, but just be aware.
It's 100%. And, we are nearing the end of our panel. So I just want to ask one closing question for you guys, because, we talked a lot of really information heavy this entire panel, but, going on your own experiences throughout your entire career in esports law or just esports in general. I'll start with you, Amar. What was your favorite moment working in the profession that you are right now?
Honestly, I just feel like you just get like a better case or a better file every single sort of month as we go on. But one that kind of ties down to what we were just talking about before and really opened my eyes to how predatory publishers can be is that there was sometimes you really have to look at you can't take your relationship with your publisher for granted. Because we had a client that reached out to us about one particular issue, and it had to do with another studio basically infringing their IP, and their publisher wanted to sue them for that reason. Client didn't have any interest in being a part of this lawsuit, but they said that they're being pressured by their publisher that they have to give consent, or they have to agree to it. And it just started out with something like that, something, well, not simple, but seemingly simple. And after we looked into it and we saw the past type of publishing agreements and agreements that they had with that publisher, their own publisher, we found out that this potential lawsuit, because of the way that the indemnity clause, and this is something that's often considered boilerplate, meaning very standard, not really changed in a contract, and even lawyers tend to just overlook it, they take it for granted. But in that, the way it was worded and the way that the contracts had changed slowly from one publishing agreement in the past to this iteration of it, ultimately, if the publisher did decide to sue, the developer would have ended up giving up their IP to the publisher in some very carefully drafted way over a series of different publishing agreements. By executing on this lawsuit, it would have triggered and they would have lost their IP. And as a publisher, they would have given that IP to another developer to develop it at a much cheaper rate. So, that was super exciting. We went in thinking that it was going to be one thing, but we uncovered something deeper at play. And it really just justified that, developers first, you need to really read your publishing agreement, regardless of who's on the other side, of how long you've, been in a relationship with this publisher, and don't take it for granted. You might be super intelligent, but lawyers, this is our craft, right? We do this as a living. A lot of experience in it as well, and it's worth just kind of taking your time and treating each situation as something independent of everything else, because you just never know.
And for you, William, what was your favorite moment during your time in this profession, or any notable remarks that you want to make?
I mean, there's a lot of great moments, especially when you get to be involved in something you're so passionate about. Esports and gaming has just been such a dream, and to be a lawyer in that space is phenomenal. I never thought I'd be here. Granted, I thought I'd be in LA playing video games professionally still and then streaming, but being a lawyer in this space has been really rewarding, and making sure that the mistakes being made from person to person aren't repeated. Protecting people's interest and making sure that they're going to do well, and in certain circumstances are quite predatory. And even just, in my opinion, play testing, client games. That's a good one. That's a good one. I mean, and you get to see the process and the game development process, and you get to see some really great stuff ahead of it being released, and you're like, holy smokes, I love this. It crosses the barrier of one of the most coolest things I've ever done in my life. On the esports side, though, and as well as the content creation side, I mean, I was very lucky to go to TwitchCon, go to certain parties, get to meet some of my heroes and kind of chat with them and really get to know. And I sound old when I say this, but this is just, I was there in Vegas enjoying the party with a bunch of content creators that are very large. I can't name them, but it was just objectively rad. Like, oh man, it was amazing. I loved it. And being able to take that energy into actually, contribute to the community and help everybody out in what skills I do have that are very niche, and being able to be familiar with the things like in the industry, then, you save your clients a lot of money in the long run, so that you don't have to teach them what a video game is when your lawyer already knows what they are. And granted, your lawyer Amar and I will understand that game developers do a lot of work on Discord, and kind of want to have somebody at least to know what the heck Discord is before you start dealing with collaborations on Discord with any devs. So love it. Some of the greatest moments of my life, just helping clients, and I just love video games. It's just great.
Yeah. Going in blind is like, oh, what is a VC? How do I connect my mic?
What are these
confusing.
What are these GIFs?
Why
are they reacting to me?
Why is this profile picture moving? What is going on? Definitely the knowledge part. So you guys are, such an important resource for, not just game developers, content creators, but also players and collegiate, or even like people who are trying to start up their business too in the esports industry. But yeah, so thank you so much, Amar and William. You guys have been absolutely lovely. It was an honor to have you guys on this panel. And I also just would like to take the time to thank our sponsors as well. Thank you so much for our co-title sponsor, again, BMO. They are running a contest right now. So if you do !CONTES and Twitch commands, you're able to find a little bit more information regarding that contest. You would have the opportunity to enter a contest to win one of 5 $20 digital Steam gift cards. So we should check that out. Another one as well, BMO Student and Banking. They have these very, very nice student checking and savings options for you, credit cards and borrowing options, which are designed for students, and plus you get $125 in cash and 6 months of Domino's Pizza. We know you guys love pizza. So make sure to check them out. And the command is going to be !BMO. On the other hand, you also have BMO Next Level. We had the panel earlier, if you guys were here to take a look at that. BMO Next Level is a Twitch channel and Discord server dedicated to helping you level up not only in-game, but also in your professional or personal finances. So you can join Sean Frame, which was our lovely guest, which is BMO's gaming relations specialist, as he plays through your favorite titles while giving detailed walkthroughs on financial topics that matter to you. So make sure to check them out at BMO and XTLVL, and the same for that Twitch command. And again, also to our charity show match sponsors, got Strawberry and Egg. I'll find more information by using the Twitch command !Strawberry and Egg, typed out exactly how it sounds. And they're a local business located in Vancouver, so make sure to check them out and get 50% off all items if you say that CIE sent you. And also, finally, our charity show match sponsor, Solaris, which is on X, is going to be at Solaris, SOLARIS_GG, and they're an esports team based in Vancouver, BC, and they have a Marvel Rivals and Overwatch competition team. So they'll take a look at that too. So again, thank you so much for everybody for joining us. And again, thank you again for our lovely panelists, Amar and William. Again, a pleasure to have you guys. Great conversations. My name was Zlion. I was your host for today, and looking forward to see you guys in the next stream. And the next topic, I believe, after this is the Overwatch lower bracket finals, which is going to happen 3:30 p.m. PST and 6:30 p.m. EST, as well as the grand finals that are happening later tonight as well. So, all right, take care, guys. Thank you so much, and we'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye. Take care.